Hey, what's up, guys? In this video, I will be talking about solar minimum. I will be discussing what solar minimum is, okay? So, solar minimum, a change in the sun's activity where sunspots and solar flares become less active. Okay, now what is a sunspot? A sunspot is a magnetic explosion on the sun that bombards Earth and its atmosphere with radiation. Okay, so they're little black holes. Okay, and these holes, they kick off energy, all right, and they kick off solar winds. Of course, those solar winds reach the planet, okay, and they affect our planet in different ways. Okay, and that's UV radiation, that's that's cosmic radiation that may be in the crossfires that may interact with the sun's magnetic field, and that's also gamma rays, X-rays, etc. Okay, so now every so often, approximately 11 years, every 11 years or so, we go into what is called a solar minimum. And that is when those sunspots that I just told you about, they become relatively quiet, okay? They become relatively quiet and they don't kick off as often as they normally do, okay? So now this is called a solar minimum, okay? Now, just because this change has occurred, it doesn't mean that the sun becomes any weaker. Because when we hear that word minimum, we think it's going to be, it is less sunspots, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's less activity. The activity just changes, so it goes from doing one thing to another. You know what I mean? So now, like I said, so just because this change occurs, it doesn't mean that the sun becomes any weaker or any less active. The activity just changes. Okay, now, so what happens is, what are the significant changes during solar minimum? Like, what do we see happening that correlates to us that we know that we are in solar minimum? Well, one thing we know is the coronal holes stay open longer. Okay, the coronal holes stay open longer. Now, what is a coronal hole? Okay, well, the sun's magnetic shield, every so often, it opens up to release different radiation and particles and cosmic radiation that makes its way to the sun. It opens up. It has a very intelligent system where these holes open up, so some of that radiation can be dispersed and released, so it doesn't, I guess, overwhelm the sun. Now, as you can see, what happens are these coronal holes are normal. They happen all throughout the sun cycle, right? But we notice that during solar minimum, these holes stay open longer, um, roughly about 6 months at a time. Okay. Now, what does this mean though? Now, when these holes stay open longer, the solar wind that is ejected from the holes overwhelms the Earth's atmosphere and cause geomagnetic storms. Okay, so that's why that's significant. Just think about it. If the sun opens up its magnetic shield to release this radiation is going to do what? It's going to hit our planet. And being that it's staying open longer, that means we're more exposed to the radiation for longer periods of time. All right. So that's one significant change. That's one thing that makes solar minimum what it is. Okay. Also, during this time of minimum, our what happens is our upper atmosphere, Earth's upper atmosphere, it cools. It cools and collapses. Okay. So we know our atmosphere is what quote unquote protects us from cosmic and solar radiation, right? So our atmosphere plays like almost like a filter, where we know some radiation is going to come through, but it keeps a balance, on the radiation cap, so to speak. But what happens is during the solar minimum, the upper atmosphere actually cools and collapses. Okay. Now, this allows more radiation to our planet. During the minimum, the sun's magnetic shield also weakens, and it allows more cosmic rays which enter Earth's atmosphere as well. So, okay, so let's recap. We have Coronal holes stay open longer, which is the sun releasing radiation. All right, which hits Earth and surrounding planets. And then we have the Earth's atmosphere cools and collapses. And we know that the atmosphere is like a filter to make sure too much cosmic foreign radiation doesn't come into the atmosphere. Well, we know that cools and collapses during solar minimum. And then we also know that the sun's magnetic shield weakens, which allows more cosmic radiation into the sun. All right. So now, why is all this important in understanding solar minimum? Like, what does this mean for our planet? Well, what this means is that during this time of minimum, our current way of life is extremely vulnerable because these storms, these geomagnetic storms, they can cause aurors and knock out communication and transportation. Okay. So I mean, not transportation, but transportation, travel and all that. You know what I mean? So that's why that's important. So the thing is, that's why it's important to understand these things so you can know what time that we're coming into and how it affects us. This also would affect us directly as people. So we want to make sure we're taking care of ourselves. We want to make sure we're eating right, doing all the proper things to take care of ourselves because we know that during solar minimum, there's going to be more radiation in our on our planet, in our atmosphere. Okay. And so it's just like in the summertime, you know, when you're getting more UV rays, you got to do what? You have to protect yourself. You have to make sure you're eating right, staying hydrated, things like that, right? So, guys, that's solar minimum in a nutshell. Hopefully, you learned something. Hopefully, this sparks your mind for you to get into, things such as solar minimum, astrophysics, and space science, and etc. And thank you for joining me, and have a great one.